This chapter is all about what we call the process of distinction, how some social categories have come to take on really significant meaning in life through this process of creating ways of dividing ourselves, dividing, stereotyping, performing, and then ranking these categories. So this table here that I'm sharing on table 3.1 is basically your guide to what you're going to be doing for this voice thread. You are going to pick an identity category, one of these things in the column across the top. And you can pick one of these, or you can think about a different category that is significant to society. Religious identity, immigration status, anything like that. Then you're going to kind of fill out this column for the identity that you've picked. So you're going to talk about, okay, when was racial identity invented, or when did one's status as an immigrant become significant? So not the fact of immigration, right? Of course, anytime somebody migrates, that they're by default an immigrant, right? However, when did our society begin to really differentiate between the rights and statuses that immigrants have and those that non-immigrants have? You're going to maybe need to do some background research on this, especially for the invention stage of this question. And then divide. How are we going about separating people into these groups? What are some stereotypes that we have developed as societies to talk about these groups' performance? How do we do this identity in the world? Are there ways in which, once we've heard those stereotypes, once we know that we are part of a particular gender or racial category, that we then act it out? Gender is a really easy one to think about because, the way that I cut my hair, the clothes that I choose to put on every single day, those are things that I do that send signals about my gender identity in some way, right? But you can think about racial identity, religious identity. Do I wear symbols of my faith? Do I pray 5 times a day at certain times of day? Do I behave in certain ways to embody for myself and for others what my religious faith might be? Then rank. How does contemporary U.S. society elevate some subcategories within this identity over others? So your job is to basically fill out one column of this chart that you see about a specific distinction. A couple of tips to think about while you're thinking about this assignment. Remember that you may have personal experience that you can bring to this, especially when you think about well-known common stereotypes in the world. But you are going to need some outside systemic research to kind of corroborate some of this stuff, especially stuff about, for example, historical invention, and then for ranking, you're going to kind of want to not just say, oh, everybody knows this. If you can find a statistic, a research study, or something that reaffirms that there are ways in which some subgroups within this category have more opportunities than others, that will be a stronger post. You don't have to explain every single example, right? You need to just give me one really good example for each stage of the process. Remember too, if we're talking about a category like age across your 5 slides, you need to have different age groups. You can't have everything be about being teenagers, right? You should talk about children in one, adults in another, teenagers maybe in a third, and the elderly in yet a 4th category. Like across these, you should use multiple examples. Again, it doesn't have to be exhaustive. If we tried to use every single religious identity that existed in the United States, you wouldn't be able to finish this assignment, right? However, you need to make sure that you're not just focusing on one subgroup within that broader identity category. This one is a little more intense or involved because you do need 5 slides and you need to kind of go through this whole process for a category. So don't hesitate to reach out to your instructor if you have any questions about how to proceed. Remember too that this assignment absolutely requires you to take a look at someone else's post and respond. And when you're responding, make sure you answer those questions in the prompt. Don't just say, hey, you did a great job. Make sure that you are responding to those questions and talking about the relationship between what they're talking about and the sort of vocabulary around status that comes up in Chapter 3. Thanks, and good luck. And I think it's going to be a great opportunity to explore these concepts a little more deeply.